really want to make sure that the writing style is very specific to what I'm looking for. So 4.5, primarily think of that as your tool for that writing assistant. So even honestly, if you're brainstorming something and you want a much more detailed, creative response, 4.5 is probably going to be a little bit better suited than 4.0. And then we have our O series of reasoning models. So any of the models that you see here that start with a little o indicate that this is what we call a reasoning model. So just like the name implies, these are models that are trained to not just go out and get you an answer as quick as possible, but to actually think through your prompt and do some research on the back end before coming back with some kind of a response. So O3 is going to really be the most powerful of those reasoning models. And that is what is used by default in our deep research tool, which I know Rich is going to cover a little bit more later on here. But then we also have O4 mini and O4 mini high. So anytime you see the word mini in one of our model names, just think of that as a model that is designed to be even faster. So one thing you will notice if you've played around with any of the reasoning models, or you're going to start doing that after today's session, is that because they are trained to go out and really do research and take their time, they will take a while to come back with a response. It's not going to be that instantaneous typing that you see back when you're working in 4.0 within ChatGPT. It might take a couple of seconds, if not a couple of minutes, to come back, depending on the difficulty of the prompt that you sent its way. So the mini reasoning models like O4 mini are basically distilled down models that we've made a little bit smaller in order to help them move more quickly. And O4 mini high in particular was really set up so that it's really good at highly technical tasks like coding and able to come back with faster answers while still providing you with that kind of deep realm of research and technical insight that you might be looking for. So that's kind of the broad strokes vision of our various different models. Rich, I don't know if there's anything else that you would add to those descriptions.
No, I think that was great. I think that's exactly what we needed to hear. I think it's reassuring for me as a non-insider at the company to know that I think I use the models pretty similarly to the way you do. I would say I'm probably using 4.0 75% of the time that I'm here in ChatGPT, and I'm using O3, a reasoning model, another 20%. Otherwise, I'm sort of playing around with other stuff. Okay, I think my screen share is still off, and I need to ask the host to let my screen be visible again to everybody. I want to make sure you can see what I'm sharing here. Okay, great. So yeah, let me show an example of 4.0 and O3 in action. So 4.0 is the faster, kind of more traditional engagement with ChatGPT that doesn't do that interim reasoning step. And so, here's a pretty straightforward prompt that I typed in for medium-sized nonprofits. What are some things that Gen AI is not good for? And lo and behold, it remembered my custom instructions. It said, "Thanks, Rich," knows my name. "Before I go any further, do you want me to take on a specific role? And do you have 5 clarifying questions? Well, it's not a real person. It's still my fake colleague, so I can answer in a pretty straightforward way. I don't have to ask it how its weekend went. Great. It got my answers, and then it moves forward and gives me some pretty direct responses in a straightforward and fast way. That's an example of working with ChatGPT model 4.0. But here's O3. In this case, I uploaded a spreadsheet. You can't see it right now, but I uploaded a spreadsheet with some feedback from webinar participants. It said, "Do you want me to adopt a specific role?" I said, "Yes, be a data and a survey expert." They asked me if I wanted 5 questions. I said no. And it did some thinking. It spent 2 minutes and 18 seconds thinking about my original prompt, which was simply, "What is this?" Uploading a spreadsheet. And here, if you click the caret next to the thinking message, you can actually see what the thinking was. It does. The user uploaded a file. It did some analysis by using code. It said, okay, all right, in the analysis channel, I can load the CSV, the spreadsheet, using Python. So it's sort of thinking to itself how to break down this task. This is what was happening in the ChatGPT computer over those 2 minutes and 18 seconds. This is what it seems to include. It seems like it was exported from Zoom. So it spends 2 minutes thinking to itself, definitely, by the way, using more computing power, using more electricity than if I had just uploaded this to 4.0. And then after 2 minutes and 18 seconds of thinking, lots of coding, better set of understanding, it responded to my question of what is this with a fairly comprehensive summary, including some data analysis of what it can actually find in the survey itself. And again, the entire prompt I offered here was, what is this? So pretty interesting and I think powerful way that these new, quote, reasoning models are able to break down a task and get more done than the sort of direct answer that a 4.0 would have provided. Okay, so those are the features that I would describe as, understanding and personalizing the way you use ChatGPT for your own use. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the multimodal features. What that means is voice mode. It means what OpenAI calls vision, or reviewing images, and it also includes doing mobile work. So for these examples and demos to be the most impressive, I have to do stuff live. So instead of just showing you screens that I opened up before we got on the call together, I am going to have to try to show you some things live and hope that my internet connection where I am in New York is working well enough for you all to see some interesting things. But first, let's go understand voice mode a little bit. So you saw that during settings, I chose the particular voice that I like to work with. Let's go down here to that voice mode button. This is the black button, which sort of has that audio logo. Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Everything sounds good on my end.
Can you do a very brief welcome to more than 1,000 webinar attendees? We're talking about AI for nonprofits. And then once you welcome them in English, can you briefly repeat it in Hindi and Haitian Creole?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have over 1,000 of you joining us today to talk about AI for nonprofits. Let's make this session impactful and insightful. Hello, सब लोग. हमें बहुत खुशी है कि आज हमारे साथ 1,000 से भी ज्यादा लोग जुड़े हैं ताकि हम गैर लाभकारी संगठनों के लिए AI के बारे में बात कर सकें। चलिए इस सत्र को असरदार और ज्ञानवर्धक बनाते हैं। Bonjour tout le monde, nous comptons en pile desque gain plus passer 1000 moun qui avec nous jodia pour nous parler sur intelligence artificielle pour organisation sans but lucratif. En fait session ça impactant ak instructif.
Great. So you can see how we were able to use voice mode to interact directly with the tool. Hopefully you all heard. Now, my Hindi and Haitian Creole is not very good. So if you all want to put in the chat whether you thought the translation was accurate and useful, please feel free to do that. And you can see everything we discussed verbally, it also was tracking in writing. So again, we can share, we can go back to these conversations over time, and everything was tracked down in a written form as well. So that's an example of understanding what's possible in voice mode just here on the desktop. And then let's talk about images. Let's talk about what it means for ChatGPT to work with documents and pictures. This is different from having it create pictures. This is a picture that I took of a Post-it, a Post-it note that I had on my desk of some things I needed to do. I will admit I made this simple one just for the purposes of sharing with you. I'm not giving you my full to-do list on this webinar, but it's got a few things that I needed to do over a day, and one of them was crossed off. So I uploaded the document, I uploaded this picture, and then I just said, put this list in a spreadsheet, and based on the visual cues, indicate whether the task has been accomplished or not, right? So I didn't say done, has to be done. I just crossed one of them out, and I'm asking ChatGPT to really understand what does that mean. And by the way, I did not modify my handwriting to make what I wrote easier to read. And in about 5 seconds, 4.0, the lighter model, said, here, to-do list, here's a spreadsheet. Check email, make the slides, cook dinner. You did get that one done. You didn't get the other one done. So a nice reminder that, even working with data, you don't have to be working with structured data, spreadsheets, or even PDFs. You can take a picture of a page of notes of a blackboard or a whiteboard from a conference and ask ChatGPT to help you organize and structure that information for use in a number of different ways. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I want to show you mobile use. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to let you watch me play with my phone, which is my children's dream all the time, that I would watch them play with their phone. Okay, here's my phone. I have the ChatGPT app, just like many of us do. Instead of typing into it or even voice dictating, I'm going to use the voice mode. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Hey, Rich, I can hear you loud and clear. What's up?
Now I'm turning on vision mode. Okay, hey, chat, can you tell me what we're looking at and how much this would cost if I bought it online?
Sure thing. I can see you're holding a Micron 05 pen. These pens are popular for detailed drawing and writing. A single one usually costs around $3 to $4 online.
Okay, so hopefully that came through and you were able to hear and see that engagement as well. And that's mobile use, right? Everything we can do with ChatGPT in terms of voice, in terms of vision, is also possible with the phone. And that means walking around the world, you can take pictures of, and I think, let's see, can you all see my screen? Here we go again. You can take pictures of things that you're working on. You can find objects that aren't working properly and ask ChatGPT for the instruction manual for how to fix a coffee maker. You can take a picture of the way people are engaging in the world and ask for a marketing tagline based on a group of young people playing in an after-school program. So all kinds of different things that are possible with mobile voice and vision. And then we're going to talk about the final list of these broader advanced features before we wrap up and turn it over to our Q&A session, where we invite Lauren back in and are able to really engage with our colleagues from OpenAI. Okay, so here is the final list of things that I want to share with you all. I want to remind you of a couple of things that ChatGPT can do. I want to help you notice that it's actually doing some things better than ever, which is really important. And then we'll talk about some of those bigger picture features that, according to our survey, most of you haven't ever actually used or are using very rarely. So first, I do want to remind everyone that ChatGPT, as a generative AI tool, we always say that generative AI is basically a fancy autocomplete. Just like when you're texting and it's recommending that next word that we've all seen for years, generative AI is doing the same thing. We're most comfortable thinking about that from a perspective of words, as it writes a sentence, a paragraph, or even an entire report. But as a reminder, when you can do generative AI in that way, you can do it with computer code just as easily as you can do it with words. And so while there were, I think, some valid early concerns that generative AI isn't good at math, or it hallucinates when you ask it to do formulas, it turns out that when you, certainly when you ask it or remind it, but most of the time when it's doing a data analysis project that involves writing itself some code to figure things out, you actually get a pretty accurate numerical and statistical analysis. So in this case, I uploaded again a spreadsheet just to sort of say, hey, how many rows are in this file, and it wrote some code, it counted, and it told me there were 2,026. And then again, this is 4.0. This is not that longer term thinking mode, but I said this is a survey. were asking people whether they have any concerns. And said, oh, okay, there's 413 examples when people said they have no concerns about using AI at work. But doing the give and take that I would do just as if I did with a real colleague, I said, well, be more expansive. I don't only want to hear in that survey when people have said no. There's lots of ways that might indicate that they don't have concerns with AI. And my fake colleague came back and said, oh, when you remind me of that, when I think about it that way, there's 560 responses in this survey that indicate people are not worried about AI. And if I click this little button here, that allows me to view the coding that it was writing for itself. And I can see, in addition to looking for any survey response that said no, it looked for not worried. It's fine. I'm okay with it. Now, by the way, I don't know how to do any coding. I don't really know what this is. I would never have been able to put something like this together, but I'm glad my fake colleague, ChatGPT, was able to help me with that. Let's talk a little bit about image generation again. Lots of people were really wowed by some of the aspects of the way ChatGPT and its kind of sister AI program, Dolly, could make pictures when it first came out, but everyone knew that it couldn't spell, and that a really obvious way to figure out if something was AI generated was that the words were all messed up. It turns out over the past couple of months, an upgrade has really changed that pretty dramatically. So, from our organization, the AI for Nonprofits Sprint, here I wrote, celebrate the sprint with a 1950s era Popular Mechanics cover. This was a magazine my dad used to love. And then make a full one-page interior article. And so here we have an image that, in fact, is spelled exactly right. No spelling mistakes. It does, in fact, look like a 1950s cover article. And then it writes an entire article about our AI for Nonprofits Sprint. It includes graphics, it includes words, it does the thing that magazines do where it hyphenates right at the end of each column, not a spelling mistake to be seen. So if you had mostly experienced using image generation, even up until a few months ago, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised to see what Gen AI tools can do at this moment. And also, photorealistic images, right? I think a lot of us saw news articles that, there's the wrong number of fingers, and it's so obvious to see when images are created. By the way, there's obviously risk and challenges to successful photorealistic image generation, and we should all be thinking about deep fakes and what that might mean to vulnerable populations we work with or who are in our own families. But here I said, I want a photorealistic image of 16 people on a Zoom call, diverse by age, gender, and race. And it gave me something pretty thoughtful. Some are smiling, some aren't so happy. There's some pretty significant diversity, just as I'd asked. So if I was working on a marketing document, this might be an interesting way to get some quick responses. Okay, let's talk about deep research. I would say of the advanced features that we surveyed you about, more of you have tried deep research than anything else, which is interesting. And I wonder if that's because the button is right there. I wonder if it's because you've gotten good references from friends about the quality of what's possible. Deep research is really one of the first more popular examples of what people talk about as agentic AI. When AI moves more in the direction of becoming an agent or a fake person that can actually go off and do things for a period of time. And the O3 model is close to that as well. But instead of having to live right in front of the chat, where, as we started with ChatGPT and OpenAI, you have to kind of sit here and talk to it live if you want it to be helping you. The idea of AI as an agent, to the extent that there is a clear and common definition, and we all know there's lots of jargon and hype in this world. The idea of an AI agent is that you can give it an assignment and it'll go off and come back later when it's figured it all out. So here's an assignment I gave Deep Research. I said, for a small immigration legal services nonprofit, like the one I used to run, if they want to use AI for translation, what are specific options that they can use? Now, what's interesting is that my long-time habit of asking ChatGPT to start by asking me questions is actually what deep research does every time. The first thing it always does, whether you put that request for questions in your instructions or not, is it tries to clarify the assignment, tries to get a better research brief. I answered some of its questions about how this assignment should work. It kind of gives me an updated summary of, basically it says, Rich, your original request to me wasn't clear enough, but now that I've clarified, here's what I'm actually going to go research. And then it took 18 minutes and went to 35 different websites. And so whereas an ordinary ChatGPT inquiry might have just started with one or two, in this case, it goes off, it spends a whole bunch of time, and it does a whole bunch of research, and it writes that report. And if you're interested in seeing what it did, if I had stayed by my computer, which I didn't, I had other stuff to do, you can actually watch its stream of consciousness thought for those 18 minutes. I'm searching for this, I'm examining, I'm thinking about XYZ, right? It's finding different websites, it's reading a blog, just like the miracle before Christmas, it's willing to go to Google and anybody else, right? So it's not keeping within a certain corporate framework. It goes wherever it needs to go to help us get the answers we're looking for. And it gives you its sources. It says, if you don't trust me, absolutely go click and find out what were the sources of all this research. And then I have a 25-page, well-sourced memo about how should nonprofit legal services organizations think about translation and what are some specific products they might use. So that's deep research. And again, if you have not tried deep research yet, it's worth putting in any kind of question where if you would send somebody off to spend several hours poking around and learning about something, see what it can do in 15 or 20 minutes. Let me share briefly the Canvas tool. So Canvas, amazingly, something that most of you had not seen, have not used. And it's the fourth thing that's listed down here at the bottom. So for some people, it's not even visible. You didn't even know that Canvas was a tool, maybe. If you're looking at your text window, you want to click the three dots, you want to try Canvas. Here's what Canvas does. I actually showed you this one already. Remember, we evaluated the survey. We had O3 do its thinking for 2 minutes. And then it gave me a summary of what was going on in that survey. I had a follow-up question. It did another 3 minutes of thinking. It made some charts for me, which was very nice. This is all ordinary stuff. But then I activated the Canvas tool. And I said, write a 2 to 3 page report with charts and tables highlighting the most specific findings. And here's what Canvas is. Canvas is a text editor that can exist live in a side panel. And what's nice about Canvas is rather than having to paste what ChatGPT gives you into Word or Google Docs or whatever text editor you use, it can live right here. And you can actually talk to ChatGPT about anything in your document. So if I highlight this, I can say, make this a narrative, not bullets. And if my internet is working well and everything is working the way it should, ChatGPT is going to take a couple of seconds. Oh, I still had this on the O3 mode. And it just rewrote that section from bullet points into a narrative answer, right? It also has some suggested, there's this button at the bottom right when you're using Canvas that says some of the most frequently requested. Do you want to make it longer or shorter? Do you want to adjust the reading level, right? You can open something in Canvas and say, I actually need this more for an elementary school audience or for a PhD level audience. You can just suggest that it polishes a particular section. So Canvas allows you to really work on a document, and it can include tables, it can include figures, but it allows you to work on a document and make edits without having ChatGPT rewrite the whole thing every time that you give it some feedback. And so that's Canvas, another tool that I find pretty useful on a regular basis. Let's look at projects. Projects in in some ways, it's a fancy way of working with, sort of customizing your experience of working with ChatGPT. And custom GPTs are another. And to be honest, there's quite a bit of overlap between the projects feature and the custom GPT feature. I'm going to start with projects because I actually think, even though it's a more recent, maybe even more advanced feature, it's a little bit more straightforward to understand. Projects basically says you don't have to start every ChatGPT conversation from scratch every time. I know that's what I'd done for my first 6 months of using it. Every time I came, I clicked the new chat button and we started from scratch, and I had to explain some things. It remembered what I had plugged into that customize button, but otherwise we were starting from scratch every time. When you create a project, and you can have unlimited projects, you can give it permanent information to remember that also expands over time. So you can upload documents. So here's a project where I'm thinking about this AI sprint that I run, and I've put up our PowerPoints, I've put in my budget, a list of who we're working with. I've given it some detailed instructions, similar to how you would do in a customized thing, but you can have instructions just for that relative project. And what's most exciting, you can put earlier chats and future chats, individual conversations, into the project. So what you're basically doing is creating a robot that has all of the general knowledge of ChatGPT, but the specific knowledge of the particular project you're working on. And it can be truly a project. It could also be a function. It could be you have your marketing project and your finance project. But every time you get to come back, you can start a new chat, a new conversation that has a very specific set of memories, essentially, associated with that project. And similarly, we've got custom GPTs. And GPTs are basically apps that ChatGPT lets you build yourself that have some of the same features of the projects I was just describing for you. So here's a GPT that I call my AI project advisory board. And anyone can go create GPTs anytime you want. I would argue this is, again, a situation where it's maybe not the best name in the world because we're all using ChatGPT, and this is called a GPT. It would be cool if they were named, Fredericks or something. I don't know. We probably need a better name for these things. If you create and edit your GPT directly, you go into the guts of it, not so different than how you customize ChatGPT for yourself or how you create a project. You've got your advisory board, your description. My instructions for this GPT are, I want you to be an advisory board, bring in multiple viewpoints, philanthropist, nonprofit leader, business leader, so that every time I interact with it, it's giving me those multiple perspectives. Again, I can upload different documents into its kind of permanent memory just for this particular GPT. And again, when you're working with GPTs, you can give them different personas, different backgrounds, different functions, and you can have 10 of them going on, one for fundraising, one to help you polish your public communications, etc. There is a version of, if you don't go to the configure button, you can actually have a conversation with ChatGPT where it writes the instructions to put in the configure box. So that sounds very meta. But in other words, even if you don't want to type your own instructions directly in, you can talk to it and say, I would like to create a GPT that accomplishes the following. So what's great about GPTs is, unlike projects at this point, I believe, GPTs are shareable exactly the way you want. When you're editing let's see here. I'm going to edit the GPT again. When you share your GPT, you can decide it's only for you. You can decide it's anyone who you give the link to. So if you're on a team and you create a little GPT, a little mini robot to help you with something, you can give it to anybody on your team. Or you can actually make it public to the world in what OpenAI calls the GPT store. And some of these have been viewed, thousands, tens of thousands of times, if you think you have something that the world might want to see. So I'm going to pause the demos here. I want to share a couple last thoughts, and then we will, I think, stop sharing the screen. We'll invite Lauren and maybe Alex to come back, and we'll have a conversation based on the questions that you all have been sharing over the past hour. So again, I'm Rich Limesider. So happy to have been with you all running this thing called the AI for Nonprofits Sprint. As we told you, it is an effort to work with more than 100 nonprofit organizations. We have some really wonderful partners. Many of you all in this conversation today are from some of these organizations. And here are just some of the 100 plus nonprofits that we're working with now. But I do want to invite that if you are in a leadership role at a nonprofit organization and you think partnering with our AI for Nonprofits Sprint, this project to help all staff at a nonprofit reach basic AI literacy, if you're in a leadership role at a nonprofit and think that working with us could be for you, please feel free to hit this QR code or find us online as well. We have a waiting list. We're at capacity, but would love to stay connected with you all over time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to hearing what's come up through the Q&A features.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rich. That was super helpful. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers did as well. And yeah, just to reintroduce myself for those who joined late, I'm Alex, the program manager for OpenAI Academy, joined here by Lauren, who's one of our fantastic solutions engineers. So we will do our best to get to some of the questions that were raised in the chat. With that, let's jump in. I think one question I saw that I was really interested in is about once you upload an image to ChatGPT, will it be saved there forever, or will it be deleted at some point? And maybe more generally, just like how should users be thinking about how data is saved in ChatGPT?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one, Alex. So to answer that question specifically as a starting point, when you upload an image into ChatGPT, we are not storing that permanently on our servers. Basically, we are just using that to process whatever request you submitted. And then as soon as that response is processed and an answer is provided, that image is then deleted. So it's not getting committed to our servers for hard storage at that point. More broadly, thinking about security, keep in mind that on all of our plans, including free, all data is going to be encrypted both in transit and at rest. And then on our enterprise offerings, so Teams and ChatGPT Enterprise, we guarantee that your data is never used for training or shared in any way with other instances. So, and then, also keep in mind some of the tips that Rich shared earlier on with your settings of how you can, determine how ChatGPT is remembering or not remembering past conversations with you. And then finally, you do always have the ability to go in and delete those former chats if they're no longer serving you any purpose.
Awesome.
And Lauren, I think I remember, do you mind if I just jump in a little bit?
Please.
I think I remember can you speak to, but I think there's a web page for IT staff and people who are more sophisticated than I am to understand the degree to which ChatGPT is compliant with all of this alphabet soup of SOC and HIPAA and GDPR and all this sort of stuff. If people know enough to know what that is, how do they find out how comfortable they should be?
Good call out, Rich. So if you are one of those people who understands all of those fun acronyms and alphabet soup of the security world and are looking for our certifications and compliance reports, you can go to our trust portal. I believe it's trust.openai.com, but I will verify that and have Alex or Jane send that out in the chat as well. And all you need to do if you want to access those reports is sign up for an account within our trust portal. Once that's approved, then you should be able to download those reports.
And I will just say, as someone who's who works, every day on the nonprofit side, my personal feeling and approach is, we know hacks happen. We know the internet isn't perfect out there in the world. My feeling is that it's worth kind of, there may be some things that nonprofits just don't want to ever have on the internet, period. They don't want to have in the cloud. They're thinking about security. They're thinking about conversations that are happening with certain vulnerable folks. That is reasonable. But I also think that most of the organizations I work with are in fact putting information they believe is quite confidential and sensitive onto the cloud all the time, right? When we're emailing it, it's going into the cloud. When it's living in a Microsoft SharePoint server, or it's sitting as in the Google Cloud, we're actually putting stuff through, online all the time. And so my sense is that sort of whatever processes and procedures we're thinking about for our other data, with other companies that are making similar promises sort of makes sense here. And so to be really blunt, it's never been entirely clear to me why we would be more nervous about putting stuff with a reputable company in AI than we should have already been in the fact that we're sharing all kinds of information online all the time. So personally, I'm generally pretty comfortable sharing things.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. There's a couple more questions about images. Maybe we'll stick on that theme. One is about whether it's possible to delete images from the library. I think that's a pretty new feature, this image library, which a lot of people are excited about. Maybe let's start there because I forgot what the second one was. Oh, I found the second one. The second one was about whether people should remove metadata from images before uploading them.
Yes. So, okay, let's start with the library as a starting point. So whenever you ask ChatGPT to create an image for you, once it's done, it's putting it in that library for you so that you have kind of easier reference to it. I think that's especially helpful for like graphic designers and folks who are using that feature really heavily and may not know exactly where in their like chat history they got a specific image. And it is a little bit counterintuitive, but if you want to delete images from that library, all you have to do is actually go delete the chat itself. So, whatever chat you have in the left-hand side where you prompted ChatGPT to create that image for you, if you delete that particular chat, you'll notice that it will disappear from your library as well.
Got it. Great. And what about the metadata?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a good question, and it's really dependent on what type of metadata is in that image and what you are personally comfortable with sharing. Also, what your organization's policy is. Definitely want to make sure everyone here is following their company's guidelines on what they are allowed to share in tools like ChatGPT. But if depending on what you're asking ChatGPT, like a fun one that I'll use as an example here that I think gained a lot of popularity when our reasoning models were first released was the idea of using ChatGPT as a GeoGuessr. So uploading a random image and asking ChatGPT to go figure out where was this photo taken without any like visual marker symbols on the photo itself. And if you're kind of testing its capabilities in that way, you want to remove the metadata so that you're not giving it like the underlying hints and clues that are going to just be a dead giveaway. But by and large, I don't typically go through the process of removing the metadata. But again, I am being mindful of, not sending any sensitive info into ChatGPT.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense. So one question here about the reasoning models. The question is like, can we make them faster? But maybe to broaden that a little bit, can you share a little bit about like why they're slower than some of the other models, and maybe like what the purpose of the mini models is as well?
Yeah, so I touched on this when I was kind of briefly covering the overview of our various different models. And Alex, maybe this is a whole other Academy session that we plan for some time in the future. But the reasoning models, like I mentioned beforehand, are really designed to take their time and to think through the task that you give it with the chain of thought that a human would. So if you give it a research task, it's going to actually go out and conduct that research and look for information out on the web that it has access to and pull as much data as it possibly can in order to give you the most robust source of information to ultimately create that memo or output that you're looking for. So that invariably does take some time. Now, the mini models are basically distilled versions of those reasoning models that we've been able to make smaller so that they can complete those tasks more quickly. But the trade-off, of course, anytime that you're asking a really complex reasoning model to move faster, is it's looking at less information. So if you are trying to ask it to really, get as much information as possible, give it that 10 to 15 minutes that it's going to need, still probably hours or days faster than what any individual human is going to be able to go out and do. But those mini models are really good for any type of faster reasoning activity that you're looking for ChatGPT to accomplish.
Awesome. That's great.
Lauren, are there limits to the number of different instances you can have going on or across different platforms when you have sort of one account?
Are you talking about in different models themselves?
Or can I have ChatGPT running in 6 tabs and on my phone?
I do. I have probably about 20 different ChatGPT tabs open at any given point in time. The one thing that you will notice that is kind of the only limitation I've come across is you can't be signed into multiple accounts on the same device at the same time. You can easily toggle between those different accounts. But if you toggle in one browser tab to your personal account and you've got professional pulled up in another one, it will switch over to your personal in both locations.
Cool. So I want to circle back to nonprofits specifically. I wonder, Rich, if you think there are particular use cases where nonprofits might think about automation, like a task that they do a lot, and then how they might go about automating it. And maybe Rich, you can start, and Lauren, you can add anything.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are opportunities that are pretty distinct in the nonprofit or the social sector. And then there are some things that I think are really very, very similar to the way any individual or organization might think about using a Gen AI tool. I think for the most part, the organizations we're working with, these 100 plus nonprofits, every single one of them has always felt like they were only doing a quarter of the work they wanted to do in the world. So frankly, the opportunities to invest in working with a Gen AI tool to automate any kind of task are really, the benefits are really going to accrue toward fighting burnout among staff. Maybe that social worker just gets to go home a little bit earlier that night, or supporting more people, more young people, more patients, more folks coming into a drop-in center, as opposed to thinking about ways to, frankly, cut teams or reduce workforce. I think the social sector is going to have a pretty different perspective on the opportunities in terms of working with Gen AI because there's so much more work to be done. I think some of the stuff that doesn't change is and then the second thing is, and this is true for some places in the private sector, not for everywhere. For the most part in the social sector, we want people to automate the parts of their job that don't involve engaging with humans and especially vulnerable populations to maximize the amount of time the human has to engage with the human. So if I was still running the legal services organization, I want my paralegals and my social workers and my attorneys spending less time writing letters to school principals and things like that, and spending more time every single week actually engaging, meeting with young people, getting on calls, and really supporting folks directly. And so I think those are important opportunities. Where the automation comes from, I actually think looks very much like what's going to happen in a lot of other sectors. I do think people in accounting and finance should be using AI to, manage reimbursement receipts faster than they always, than they had to in the past. I think leaders should be role playing with Gen AI to practice for tough conversations on their team or with outside investors, funders, things like that. I'm deeply excited, particularly from an inclusion perspective, about opportunities to support professional development using Gen AI, allowing people who come from lots of different backgrounds to use role playing and other tools that ChatGPT can offer to get better at their jobs when they wouldn't have had those opportunities before. So there's a little bit that's different, and I think there's a lot that's actually the same.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one thing I might add. I used to work at nonprofits before joining OpenAI, and I think one thing that can really be tiresome to people working in nonprofits, whether on the program side or fundraising, is all the kind of repetitive writing you might have to do for grants and for grant reporting. So I met one nonprofit leader from the Bronx who took all of their program literature, so their website, some of their annual reports, uploaded that to ChatGPT, and then would use that to kind of fill out some of the repetitive questions that you get in those reporting forms. What's the mission of your organization in 50 words? And then what's the 200-word version of that? So I think that can be something that's really powerful. It's just like writing that first draft of content, and then you can spend time on, the unique parts that are the most important. Cool. Let me see what else do we have here.
And Lauren, if you thought we missed anything in the presentation or if it triggered anything for you.
No, I think, Rich, you covered all of the things that immediately came to mind for me with that question. Just maybe doubling down on the last thing you mentioned, which is giving everyone access to more information than they previously, could have imagined having access to. I saw a quote recently, and I'm blanking on who said it, but it's the hottest new programming language is English. And I loved that because I think it really speaks to the fact that you don't have to be a master, have gone through master classes in Python or JavaScript in order to start working to play around as a software developer. Anyone who has access to ChatGPT can start playing around with these skill sets. And it just really speaks to the idea that we're democratizing access to information across all topics and industries so that people can just do more with their time. And I think, to your point also, being able to spend more time on those human interactions that are so valuable in the nonprofit segment is just incredibly impactful to the mission that everyone is serving.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Lauren. And I think that quote was Andre Karpathy, who is one of the OpenAI founders now at Tesla. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the questions. I think there's one I think might be good to end on, which is maybe for each of you. What's one of the use cases of AI that you've seen in the wild that you found like most impressive or most interesting that might be interesting to this audience?
Rich, I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and we have a community of practice of across the nonprofits we're working with. They have tens of thousands of staff, but we've got 450 that are coming together on a monthly basis and really just sort of working through, sharing examples, sharing best practices. I think, that people are very clearly, Alex, just like you say, that they're frankly saving a lot of time on writing repetitive tasks. They're developing frameworks for PowerPoint presentations that would take them, sort of hours and days. But I will say, even, given all of the advanced features and other things we were talking about today, I still think the role-playing abilities are the parts that have been most impressive to me, because I think it supports so many different nonprofit staff in different functions, in different in different roles. I'm super excited by some of the preliminary research that shows how effective and useful tools like ChatGPT are to folks in the neurodivergent community. We're learning that people who've been given feedback their whole careers that they're too blunt or too direct, or they're engaging in the workplace in a way that it isn't right. They're actually running their written communications. They're practicing for conversations. They're using the robots to help them in a way come across as more human, which is kind of interesting and has its own philosophical ramifications. But the opportunity to really interact with a sort of always available fake person, I just think is already making a really significant difference to a lot of the people we're working with.
And maybe along a similar vein, this isn't a totally like transformational use case, but something that I have started to leverage ChatGPT for day in and day out is to really help me with some of those repetitive tasks that just suck up a lot of my day. So for instance, I'm speaking with customers a lot throughout the day, and sometimes I have handwritten notes in 20 different places. And the last thing I want to do at the end of the day is go type up those notes, turn them into something sensical that I can share out with the team, do that cleanup effort. And so what I have started to do is just take photos of all of my notes if they're handwritten, or even just screenshots from the 10 different tabs where I've taken notes. And then I send them into ChatGPT and ask it to give me a quick summary that I can share back with everyone to keep us on track for that customer work. And then the other thing I love to do is use voice mode, which you demonstrated, Rich, to just kind of stream of conscious at the end of the day, share some reflections, what went well, what I think that didn't go well, areas where I could improve, and then any to-dos that I need to kind of add to my task list. And I'll just ask ChatGPT as a follow-up, can you just send me a quick to-do list and give me your recommendations on priorities so that I go into the next day with that hit list of things that I should be focusing on.
Yeah, I love that one, Lauren. I think using voice mode is great for that. I think something else you can do is just record your voice and then send it in the chat. I did that, if you imagine this is like the end of a long day, maybe you're cooking dinner and you can't get work off your mind because you have a million things running through it. And you just stream of conscious, here's all the things that I'm thinking about. Can you organize it and send it back? Or can you, convert this into a Slack message that I can send my team that makes sense? Which at the end of a long day, that's a long time and painful thing to do. And it saves you so much time. So that's definitely a favorite one of mine. Awesome. So before we wrap up, I just want to let everybody know that this is really just the beginning of the content that we're going to have for nonprofits. So would definitely recommend people come back, check out OpenAI Academy. There will be content specifically for nonprofits. There will be content for other audiences that you might still find useful. So be on the lookout for that. And then, yeah, Rich, is there anything else you want to share, anything about resources or anything else that you want the audience to know before we sign off?
No, so grateful to you all, grateful to the partnership with OpenAI that we've had over the past year, and thanks for letting me be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Rich, and thank you, Lauren, and we'll see you all